Fracking, a technique designed to recover gas and oil from shale rock, is making more and more enemies around the world. The anger stems from the potentially enormous environmental dangers posed by the extraction method. The most recent anti-fracking rallies indeed have taken place in Romania and in northern England. As Polly Boiko reports next, it's a tough struggle for locals and activists.
Fracking and protests seem to be synonymous, and certainly in my experience of covering these stories, there hasn't been an area where locals haven't been opposed to this technology taking place on their doorstep. And there's just been a crackdown. We've heard reports from Romania where police have forcibly removed local villagers from where energy giant Chevron was supposed to start test drilling. Well, I can tell you, I can believe that that crackdown was brutal. And I can tell you it would have to be, because I was in that village and I was covering that story when those protesters were forming a human chain around that site. And they said to me that they would fight to the death to avoid this fracking taking place.
They didn't ask us. We didn't matter to them.
We hope to stop them, even if it means paying with our lives. Even if they want to send the army, we will die, but we won't give up until they outlaw fracking in Romania.
This is certainly a big issue in the UK as well. People here aren't immune to it. At the moment, we've got protests taking place in Greater Manchester, where a company called iGas is supposed to start exploratory drilling. And we know that protesters there have been trying to block roads in order to avoid trucks from arriving at the test site. And this is just one particular test well, but this company is supposed to be opening more wells, and they're supposed to have more drilling sites, because the northwest of England is full of shale gas. The reserves could last the UK in terms of energy supply for up to 6 years. Now, I've been covering these fracking stories. We've had protests in Sussex as well over other test sites, and I personally spoke to a man in Lancashire last year who showed me a crack on his wall from earthquakes that had taken place near Blackpool from the quadrilla fracking taking place there. So these are things that are still, these protests are still taking place, and there is a sense, of course, the protest at the moment in Manchester, that is an exploratory drilling, that's a test site, but there is a sense that if companies are investing money into exploratory drilling, it's going to lead to fracking.
Polly Boiko reporting there. Let's get some thoughts now from Jean Lambert. She's an MEP from the Green Party of England and Wales. She's joining us on the line from Brussels there. Hi, Jean. Evening to you. Thanks for your time. We're seeing fracking causing more and more problems. We're hearing more and more stories about it coming out now from East and West Europe. Is it going to draw the attention from the EU authorities at last, or are they still turning more of a blind eye to it than you'd like?
Well, certainly there's action that we'd really like to see, and some degree of certainty about, you know, what the legislation is that applies to a lot of the test drilling. There's a question about, you know, whether environmental impact assessments are needed for some of this, given that it's just exploratory, whether, you know, it's environmental impact for the actual drilling itself or whatever. So we would certainly like to see some really strict rules about this, because the consequences, you know, are potentially very damaging.
Are the people that need to listening to you, though?
Well, I think, you know, there's certainly a big disagreement there. There are countries which are very much in favour of moving ahead, you know, with maximum extraction of shale gas. They see this as a way of maybe securing more of their own energy supply, rather than perhaps relying on sort of whether it's Russia, Iran or wherever. There are others that have a de facto moratorium on this, that are not going to go ahead, countries such as France. So there is a real difference of opinion. But I think, you know, that across the European Union, we really need to be deciding what are the criteria that we need here, particularly from the environmental perspective.
Actually, while we're chatting, let's bring up a map. We've got a world map here of countries that allow it, countries that are banning it, etc., etc. We'll show our viewers that. If we can just put it on screen now. It's just in Europe, I gather. Let's just focus in. Yeah, OK, so that's interesting to see some of the countries there that have banned it so far. But there's a lot of big business pressure here, isn't it? That's the thing. That's what you're up against.
Well, there's a lot of big business pressure. There's certainly, you know, given the job situation as well in many EU member states, there are a lot of people that are saying, look, there are jobs in this. We're saying, well, look, there are jobs in a lot of other things. There's jobs in renewable energies, there are jobs in energy efficiency, there are jobs in new technologies. So quite, we don't necessarily have to go down this route. And also that, if we're really serious about meeting our climate emissions reductions, we need to be looking at what is going to give us the maximum return for investment in terms of providing energy, but also providing those reduced emissions and a long-term future. I mean, your report was saying just now that one of these areas we're looking at 6 years supply. Well, 6 years supply, given the amount of money that will go into it, the amount of concern there is about it, it's maybe not the sort of the long-term sustainable energy future that you really need. So we could be investing elsewhere, and those big business companies should really be looking, I think, at different sorts of investment.
But earlier on in our
going
chat,
to, yes, provide jobs, but do the renewables too.
Earlier on in our chat, you said there's still a lot of uncertainty about the whys and why nots of this whole story. Is science really backing you up here? Yes, it's quite an unpleasant thing, obviously, to have in your back garden. We've had a lot of people on this programme saying they've even had to move house because of it, etc., etc. And they're very worried. I can understand the NIMBY side of it, if you like. But is science really backing you up here to say it is bad, it shouldn't happen?
Well, I think increasingly it is. I mean, we know that there is already sort of water stress in a number of places. The Environment Agency in the UK is warning that in some places, you're simply not going to have the water supply to do this. That there are questions about what are the chemicals used, questions about the industrialisation of the countryside. What are you doing then? We're saying that we want to increase our food production. If this clashes with potential sort of shale gas production in terms of land use, which gets priority? And also those that are saying, well, this is very good for our economies, it helps with our energy self-sufficiency. Well, that's fine if we think that governments are actually going to be in control of the technology and the way in which it's the way in which the product is marketed. But if it's just going to be sold on the general market, then where's the positives for the countries concerned? So, I think there are some big concerns economically and environmentally.
A quick final thought. I kind of guess I know what your answer is going to be, but I won't put words in your mouth. If it does have to happen, if big business does at least have some of its way, despite your thoughts on it, is there anywhere in the world that it would be more preferable to have it happen than somewhere else, if you get my drift? Is there a country in the world or an area where it could be happening and it could be done without too many problems?
Well, from my point of view, if you're not prepared to have it in your own backyard, you shouldn't be putting it in somebody else's. So I think, we should be looking at a different sort of energy future here, rather than chasing shale gas with all the positive, probable negative consequences.
All right, Jean, thanks for your thoughts. Very nice to see you tonight, MEP from the Green Party for England and Wales. Thank you. Jean Lambert.